It's time for a February reading wrap up. All right, so I read 6 books this month. One was a DNF. Start with the DNF and then work our way up to the favorite. Most of you will already guess what my favorite is. After watching tons of other wrap up videos, the point of the wrap up is not to tell you everything about the book, but to tell you like a rough kind of idea, an impression of what it is, and then also what I thought about the book. I'll start with the DNF. The first book is The Folded Clock by Heidi Julavits. This book should have worked for me. It's basically the author writing a diary for, I think it was 2 years or something, just a confessional diary of her everyday life, meditation on time, self, youth, aging, friendship, romance. It should have been something I was really excited about. And this felt very brain dumpy. And I know it's a diary and it was supposed to kind of be that, but it was just a bit too much for me. And I just wasn't finding my footing with it. I wasn't really enjoying it. I felt like a lot of stuff was like, let me tell you about this thing that happened with this person that you don't know, like a diary. And it just wasn't really what I was in the mood for. There were some things that I really did love and I underlined, and maybe one day I'll go back to it. I think this is a great book if you maybe don't want to read it straight through and you want to pick it up and read a little bit every once in a while, or read one diary entry like a week or something. But sitting down and trying to go through it all, I think I was trying to read it too much like maybe a novel or a memoir, and that's not really what this, I think, the way it should be read. That's just my own personal opinion on that one. Next up, I feel like this book is pretty controversial. Let me get a sip of coffee before I get into it. Is Sheila Heti's How a Person Should Be. I picked this up over the weekend around the time that I watched The Worst Person in the World, and I will say that watching that and reading this, I think I already loved the movie. The movie was great. But I think reading this at the same time, I did end up liking the book more because I had that movie to also, they were like companion pieces for each other in a way. I know there's a lot of people who either really love this or it's just like no go for them. Kind of how Pure Color is. Pure Color and Motherhood, I absolutely love. I would pick those two over this. So I would categorize this as autofiction. The two characters in the book are Sheila, who is a writer, and Margot, who is a painter. Margot is based off of a real, Sheila Heti's real friend. I'll put some of her paintings. I've already shared them on Instagram, but I really just adore her paintings. So I'm gonna put them here. I kind of thought it was gonna be a bit more about art and two people creating and the methods in which they create, Sheila through writing, Margot through painting, and the ways that they try and navigate figuring out how a person should live in the world as a creative. And that wasn't really what it was. I think it maybe was trying to at times, but parts of it are written as a screenplay because Sheila is trying to write a screenplay in the book and is really struggling. There's this romance that she has with a man online who asks her to do really interesting things. No judgment, but it just was, I didn't understand the purpose of it sometimes. There's like a competition in who can make the ugliest painting. There's an ugly painting competition. And she talks about the ending of her first marriage, which I really thought was beautiful. Her reflecting back on that time, why it wasn't right for her, just reflecting on the memories of that, where it went kind of wrong. She's trying to understand how we are supposed to be as people, as creatives. Like, how are we supposed to live and navigate in the world? How should we be? What is the right way to live? What is the right way to be? It's asking really, really great questions. And I almost wish that she had written this maybe later, possibly in between Motherhood and Pure Color or after Pure Color. There are moments of emails that were really interesting between Sheila and Margot. I almost wish we had more of that. I don't have great thoughts formulated around this book. I really can't explain exactly what it's about. It's just, it felt a little discombobulated at times. There were parts that were not fully, I maybe wanted more fleshed out, or I wanted more focus on, and then focus would shift somewhere else, and that just wasn't really the vibe I was wanting. But I'm glad I read it because I do love Sheila Heti. I will always read anything that she puts out. This one just wasn't my favorite of hers. We're getting into some really good ones. I feel like I'm going through this really, really fast, but I don't know if I am. This would be a good time to say that if you've enjoyed watching this video, or if you've enjoyed watching my videos, if you could like them, that'd be amazing, because that does help out a ton with this channel. And yeah, I think that's all. I really hate doing that, but yeah, if you could like it, that'd be cool. That'd be nice. We have Checkout 19 by Claire-Louise Bennett. Talked about this one in a vlog. Liked this book more than Pond because I think, and I've explained this, I think up ways and down ways and sideways and all the ways that this can be explained, but I think the reason why I liked this more is because of the subject matter. We follow a girl from her a young age living in a small town in London, and we follow her as she grows up, as she works at a checkout 19 at a supermarket, as she goes away and goes to college, and the people she interacts with throughout her life and the way they influence her and the books that they introduce her to and the way literature informs her life. We're just in the inner thoughts of our unnamed narrator, which is something that I always love. There were moments where I felt a bit lost. There's kind of like this side story where she's telling us, I believe it's like a story that she wrote when she was younger, and it's full of imagination. If I'm sure if I'd been more focused while reading it, it would have been quite enjoyable, but I felt it took me a bit out of the story. I wanted just more of her inner world, and while this was part of her inner world, the story she was telling, it just wasn't, it wasn't the most enjoyable aspect of the book to me. To me, this book just focuses on a love of literature and the ways in which stories and literature and books and the sharing of literature, and when literature comes into your life at a certain time, or stories come into your life at a certain time, from childhood to adulthood, and how they influence who you become, what you value, where you place your value, and what those books have taught you, and how they have formed, how the pages and the words written have formed and shaped who you are. I think that we all can find books that we can pinpoint certain times when they're touchstones to us, and that's very much what this book is. Beautiful things in this, really lovely. It's a wild ride. There are moments where you're going to be like, what am I reading? But overall, I think that I enjoyed this more than I was confused by it, so it made it a really great read for me. I'm gonna go heat up my coffee. I'll be right back. Coffee's heated. Now we're getting into my 3 top books for the month. Hero is, I don't know how he feels about that, but it's happening. Okay. Let's do The Forbidden Notebook by Alba de Céspedes. This is translated from Italian by Ann Goldstein, and there's a foreword by Jim Lahiri. Those are all great things for me. I did do a reading vlog, part of my journal diary reading vlog with this and The Folded Clock. This obviously was a favorite. Follow a Italian woman in her early 40s living in Rome post World War II, and she is a wife to 2 grown children who still live at home and has a husband, and she works as like a secretary in an office, and her husband works. Her children are in college, and one day she is out and it's a Sunday and she wants to go to she's going to the tobacconist to buy tobacco for her husband, and she sees a stack of black notebooks and she immediately wants one. She feels this strong pull to own one of those notebooks. Asks the man at the counter, like, I want one of those notebooks, and he's like, I cannot sell that to you. And it is illegal to sell anything but tobacco at this shop on Sundays. And she begs him, and he finally says, fine, but hide it in your coat so you don't get checked by the officer that is outside of the shop. So she does. She makes her way home, and she is already, the moment she's given the notebook, she is already trying to hide it. And as soon as she gets into her home, she continues to try and do everything she can to hide the notebook, to make sure that her family does not ever find it or see her writing in it. She writes in it late at night. She comes home early from work. She's constantly changing the hiding place. She feels that she is not worthy of being able to have those things as a 40-year-old mom, wife. It's just not the place for her to have those desires or wants to write herself down in any way, to have anything worthy of putting down on paper. And so she brings it up one day at dinner, like, what if I had a journal and I kept a diary and I wrote my feelings and thoughts? And she's kind of ridiculed for it, and she realizes, like, I need to keep this to myself. She becomes obsessed with writing in this. It is what becomes her just sitting and writing for a few minutes turns into her losing hours, her missing work, her going in on Saturdays to work so that she can write. and be alone. The more she writes, she starts to crave a space of her own. She starts to become resentful of this role that she has been in and never having time for herself, of always having to care for others. And she's discovering herself within those pages. While she's doing that, she's also understanding more things about her family that she's maybe becoming uncomfortable with. There are things that she even acknowledges by writing certain things down that happen in my family, things that I would normally just forget about or not dwell on, I'm now fixated on, I'm now dwelling on. I don't want to like give too much of this plot away because it's a very slow plot, but that is the point, is just a slow dissection of one's self through writing. It's like the lengths that she will go to preserve herself and the things she starts to realize about herself and who she is. And the things that she is discovering about herself don't align with the life that she is currently living. Overall, I think it's a really enjoyable read, and I've continually thought about it and the way that writing and journaling transforms us and makes us see ourselves differently, or maybe parts of ourselves that we invent or we maybe don't acknowledge, we maybe start to see a bit more clearly. We discover more about ourselves, we discover more about the people in our lives. It's also very much about the secrets that we keep from other people that we love and are close to, and how vital those secrets sometimes are into our own self-preservation. I'd love to talk about this with somebody else who's read it because I think it's wonderful. Heavy influence on Elena Ferrante, and that is very, very obvious. I will not talk about her. I will not bring up Ferrante again. I don't think she comes up in any of these other books. But you knew it had to pop up in one video, or one part of this video. Okay. And next up we have Painting Time by Maylis de Kerangal, translated from the French by Jessica Moore, translated from the French. This book is excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I think the only reason this isn't a 5-star is something probably really silly and probably wouldn't bother other people. Let's go back. So this is a coming of age novel about a woman named Paula. She's in her early 20s and she decides to go to art school to study trompe-l'oeil, which is the studying of reproduction, recreation, or like decorative arts and reproduction. So she's going to learn how to exact copy different types of woods, marble, just exact replicas of like materials. That's the word I wanted, materials. Very much art school nostalgia for me. So many things about it that I was like, oh yeah, been there, done that, and have the memories and maybe don't want to experience that again. The sleepless nights, the pure stench of chemicals on you, the paint just embedded into your skin, feelings of constantly being inferior, of not doing enough, of not being worthy or good enough. And that's definitely how Paula starts in this. She is kind of fumbling her way around. She doesn't really know if what she's doing is good. She doesn't know if she's doing a good job, and she just keeps going, keeps dedicating herself to it. She forms this little group of friends, and their apartment is just covered with all of their experiments and projects, and everything is just soaked in paint and turpentine. There's just jars and brushes everywhere. The sentences in this book are some of the best sentences I read this month, possibly even the year. Like, this book has got the most beautiful, beautiful descriptions of art and the process of art making. Beautiful sentences. The sentences are lush and descriptive. Like, the author is trying to paint a clear picture for you, quite literally, of the materials, of the process. The writing alone, I think, is so worth picking up this book. There are some things you may have to look up if you're not familiar with certain art terms, but I think it's definitely worth your while to do that, because you might discover some really interesting pieces of art, some things you didn't know. It's half the fun sometimes of reading books that you are not as familiar with certain things. There was stuff that I totally forgot about that I had to go and look up. It's like a refresher of art history and art practices and making. Paula does eventually gain confidence. She goes out on her own. She gets jobs. She graduates. The middle part of this book is where it was a little bit for me. Read this with someone. I buddy read this with Addie from Expand Your Shelves. I will link her Instagram below. And it was so fun reading this with somebody else, just to gush about the sentences with. And we also kind of were in agreement about the middle being kind of and the first and last part being great, and then the last part being like the weirdest fever dream. But looking back and thinking about it more, I think that it works really well. Was he okay?
Mm-hmm.
Did he get sick?
No.
Yeah. Hero's been a little sick today, so we're on couch together family duty to make sure he doesn't barf on the couch. But he seems to be okay now. Maybe he'll grace us with his presence in a minute. He's really not himself. Because you know if he was feeling himself, he would have already wiggled his way over to my lap. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. Sad puppies. Okay, so let's get into what the third part or the last part of this book is about. In the third part of this, Paula is offered a job to go to France, the southwest part of France. They're the Lascaux caves, which if you've taken any art history course at any point, I guarantee these have been brought up because they are the foundation of art, because they are the first known art as aesthetic creations in these caves. They were hidden away where humans could not find them for a very long time. I believe they were discovered by a group of boys in the 1940s. So they were sitting there untouched. They are the first known depictions of art. It's just wild to think about that. Like I'm gonna put an image of them somewhere because they're beautiful, and it's just incredible that art is, as an idea, is something that has been ingrained in us as humans for, I can't even express how many years. Like, art has always served a purpose, and we'll get into that in our next book. But they're rediscovered, and they let humans in, and that never goes well because, of course, with that brings in moisture, humidity, and molds. They have now started to destroy the caves. So the caves have been shut down for a long time. You can't go in and see them. But Paula is hired to reproduce these caves so that they can become a place for tourists to come, and they need someone who can paint exact replicas. Granted, she's only ever painted exact replicas of materials, and she's being asked to exact replicate human-made art. So with everything that she has created so far, she's been able to have like a sample of it to study and be able to reproduce. But with this, she is not allowed to see the caves, obviously. Experience of her painting this reproduction and talking about its history. Interesting to see her, someone who is trained in the art of reproduction, is now being tossed into the world of human-made art and reproducing that, and something that is aesthetic and not just material. Exploration of craft, art in the contemporary world. I think that I've seen a few people say this, but I definitely agree. I think if you liked The Idiot, this is really great for its coming of age, but also just kind of had some of the same feels as The Idiot. Also, maybe the latter half, this might be a stretch, but Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin. I also saw a few comparisons to Sally Rooney, and I really like Sally Rooney. I know everyone gives her shit, but I do like her. I would give this a shot if you really just want to read beautiful sentences, to be really inspired by writing. This is great. Last book. No surprise to anyone that my favorite book this month was Funny Weather, Art and Emergency Essays by Olivia Laing. I was looking back over some of the editing I was doing. I noticed and I realized that used wrong pronouns for Olivia Laing. I used she, I also used they a few times, but Olivia's pronouns are they, them, but I have looked at interviews online, and she is okay with any pronoun being used. That's just they that has been used the most in reference to Olivia Laing. So I just wanted to pop in and say that, and I apologize for my mistake, but from what I've researched, correct me if I'm wrong, that this is something that Laing is okay with. So hopefully we're good, but I just wanted to let you know. Thanks. This is my favorite book I've read so far this year. Granted, it's only the second month. I already read this with Clara from Chapters of Clara, who I'll link below, and the conversations that we had about this book and so many other things that expanded from this book, highlight of my month 100% was reading this with her, and just the conversations we had. And we both share a deep love of art and art history. And this book is life-changing. I haven't told you anything about it, but it's truly a life-changing book. It is a book that I think I will forever flip through almost every page, top and bottom. There's underlines everywhere. This book is about the importance of art and why art is not frivolous, and why we shouldn't treat art and artists and creatives, musicians, writers, anything like that as being this frivolous career or this frivolous hobby, and why art is so integral to us as human beings and as a society and culture, what art can teach us. Art can be aesthetic, and it's fine if it is aesthetic. Art can serve so many different purposes, but art is also a way for us to communicate our own stories of our culture, stories of the groups that we belong to. And I just am one of those people that the more art you look at, the more books you read, the more empathy and understanding and viewpoint and various viewpoints that you start to develop. And I just think that we should read more books, and we should look at more art, and we should care more about art, and we should care more about creativity in our society. And I'm not saying that would solve all of our problems, but I really think that it would benefit us as humans in ways that we can't even conceive of, because we've just never done it. Laing does this really beautiful thing of, she's telling you a little bit about the artist, a little bit of their background, how they grew up, what their influences were, their practice of art making, and then her feelings around what they've created and what she feels their art, what the artists themselves were doing for art in their time, and what the lessons can be from that. To live in a world where we get to see art and view art, what a gift. To hear music, what a gift, what a joy. To read other people's thoughts, other people's stories, other invented stories, what a gift. How are we doing?
It's good.
Okay. I'm gonna continue to process this book all year. I have a really hard time believing that something will be as good or better than this. This book should be taught in art history classes. This book should be taught, this should be like required. In college, like I was required to take certain courses, and I think this book should be required because it teaches you, it's trying to make you think about so many things that we as a society maybe don't want to think about or talk about. They're uncomfortable and they're hard, but they're really important. This is from the Freeze Columns section. It's called Paradise, and it's about gardening. It's about Olivia's time gardening, and just the way that she even writes about gardening as like a form of art. And I think this part is kind of what I found to be my favorite part, and also I think wraps up this long ramble. I need to finish because he is not okay. Is art resistance? Can you plant a garden to stop a war? It depends how you think about time. It depends what you think a seed does if it's tossed into fertile soil. But it seems to me that whatever else you do, it's worth tending to paradise, however you define it and wherever it arises. And I'll leave you with that. I won't recover from this one. I don't think. It's so good. I hope you liked this chaotic ramble. I really did my best to just hit the points, make my points. Here are the books that I read this month that I really feel like this was a great month. There were some misses, but I think there was something to take from each of them. There were parts of each that I found valuable, and I found some new favorites and possible end of the year favorites, and that's really exciting. And I feel like the more I read, the more I understand what I love. And yeah, let me know if you read any of these, if you liked them. Tell me what your favorite book of this month was. And like this video, share it. Really excited for March. March is one of my favorite months of the year. We're starting my favorite season. We're getting longer days. Everything's just good. It's gonna be good. I've got a lot of great books that I'm planning on reading this month. lots of videos that I want to do. Yeah, gardening I'm gonna do. But yeah, I hope that you have a great start to the month. I hope that your reading for February was great. And yeah, remember to take care of yourself and to always be kind, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.